Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV and welcome to this, my HPANWO TV review of episode 7 of Project Blue Book, the second season. Now this is called The Curse of the Skinwalker, and this is a very interesting title, but of course anyone who's into UFO paranormal conspiratorial matters knows the name Skinwalker. Now it refers to a real paranormal study that actually happened. Now we're getting very anachronistic here because this was in the 1990s this happened. It all kicked off in around about 1996 and it's based on reports that date back to the 70s. But of course Project Blue Book is set several decades earlier. But they decided to put the Skinwalker case into the series and turn it into an episode. There's no reason why they shouldn't do that, just because it was not contemporary to the set at the time, basically the setting of the series. We've already seen a bit of this, of course, with the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin, which was sort of moved back in time a little bit. Now, of course, the Skinwalker Ranch is a ranch, which is like what Americans call like a big farm with a farmhouse and usually like a livestock farm with cattle and other animals there, and it is in Utah, USA, and it belonged to a family called the Sherman family, and they reported all kinds of strange things, and these were investigated by George Knapp in the 1990s. George Knapp, of course, who was a journalist with was it KLAS or in Las Vegas. And he was the guy who basically investigated Bob Lazar when Bob Lazar first went public, and he decided to get involved in this and to assist him in his study into this paranormal issue, this paranormal hotspot in this ranch. He enlisted the help of an Irish scientist called Colm Kelleher, and eventually our very own George Soros got involved, that is Robert Bigelow. And thanks to his resources through the NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Science, this was a very, very well funded study, and it resulted in a book, which is I do recommend. There's a book whose title I can't remember, which is odd because I have read it. It's by Kelleher and Knapp, but there's several interviews you can listen to of them talking about Skinwalker Ranch. What's fascinating about Skinwalker Ranch is it's not just a UFO event. It is something where you get the UFO phenomenon mixed in with other things, other strange phenomenon that have appeared. This happens in a few cases. For example, the Virginia Mothman involved UFO sightings along with all kinds of other weird things, including the Mothman himself. And this is something that has led many ufologists to believe that there is a connection between UFOs and some other paranormal phenomenon. It's a connection, I think, that holds some validity, at least for some of what we call UFO encounters. What happened at Skinwalker Ranch is there were all kinds of things. People disappeared. Sometimes people went missing for a while and came back. There were UFOs, of course, along with cattle mutilations and all other kinds of animal mutilations. Interdimensional portals, like a tunnel would appear in the sky with some creature walking down it, things like that. Cryptids, weird creatures were seen, including pseudocryptids. Now these are pseudocryptids are known species of animal that appear outside their normal habitat. For example, the beast of Bodmin Moor, which is some kind of big cat, probably a puma, which has somehow found its way into the countryside of Cornwall. So that's an example of a pseudo-cryptid. Cryptids, of course, real strange animals such as Nessie, Bigfoot, things like that. There were Bigfoot sightings as well. Orbs were seen there, like tiny ghost lights and things like that. Weird magnetic effects, all kinds of things like that. In the end, what happened was the Sherman family sold the ranch to Bob Bigelow. He bought the ranch but asked if they could stay on as tenant managers, which they did, so I think they stayed on there for quite a while actually. Now something odd happened after that. Bigelow sold it to somebody else. I mean, I've not seen. I mean, I know Jeremy Corbell's made a documentary about this, which I've not seen yet. Because I've seen the Bob Lazar one. I haven't seen all the. I've saw a bit of the Skinwalker one, but I haven't seen all of it yet, and I've got to watch the rest of it. But there's several other documentaries about the Skinwalker Ranch you can actually look into. He sold it to somebody for like about £4 million or something, and the guy wanted to remain anonymous. And there's always been some kind of talk about him, that the buyer being basically the government. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, we do know, for example, that once Bigelow had made the sale, that was the end for all investigations, because the new owners put up no trespassing signs. They closed all the roads leading to the house. They basically put big fences around the land, things like that. And it is always possible, because we know that Bigelow was involved in, this was quite more recent, we know that Bigelow was involved in the ATIP thing, analysing metal, stuff like that. He may have been working under some kind of government contract. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a bad guy, you know, we can't trust him anymore, and he's no longer our George Soros or anything like that. No, it doesn't mean that. It necessarily, but it is worrying that that happened, and I do. When there's secrecy like this involved, I get a bit nervous. I wonder what's going on. Anyway, the term Skinwalker comes from Amerindian mythology. Now, I know you're supposed to say Native American these days, but I know you're supposed to, but it's politically correct. And you know what I think of political correctness, don't you? So I'm going to say Amerindian, Indian. I'm going to use traditional language. Indeed, this is what the Amerindians call themselves. So it's a piece of Amerindian mythology. Now, what the Skinwalker is? It's actually a sorcerer. The Skinwalker is a sorcerer that essentially has magical powers that can allow it to shapeshift. It can turn into animals. It can turn it can even take on the appearance of different people. And the Skinwalker is very feared because it can kidnap people, feed off their life energy, stuff like that. Very often people walking alone in the woods might be attacked by a Skinwalker, stuff like that. So it's a very fearful being, the Skinwalker. It's basically a medicine man who's using the power of black magic. Now, their Skinwalker Ranch itself is not the only place in the world which has this kind of reputation and has attracted this kind of phenomenon. Now, we know all about, I mentioned the Virginia Mothman at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where there was the Silver Bridge that collapsed, this big road bridge collapsed, and lots of people fell in the river and drowned. There's also Bempton. Now, Bempton's a bit closer to home for me because it's in the East Riding of Yorkshire. It's actually just north of Hull along the coast. You go along the coast north of Hull from the Humber estuary and you come to it. And I know there's several people I know, such as Chris Turner and Paul Sinclair, who I'm familiar with. They've been doing research there. And they've made a film, actually. I've got the DVD of it. I watched it a little while ago. Where is it? I had the DVD of it somewhere. It's called Bringing Down the Light or something like that. But it's worth watching anyway. It's Paul has written about 3 books on this subject as well. What you get to Bempton is exactly the same thing you get at Skinwalker Ranch. So the TV series, this TV episode, actually is set in a ranch very like Skinwalker Ranch, but it's owned by a family called the Chapmans. There's a young man and woman and their little boy, who's about 6 or 7 years old, and he sleepwalks. And apparently he's been sleepwalking since the family moved into this ranch, and he's had these problems since the family moved into the ranch. Now, he goes out. He walks out the house one night. Now, this sleepwalking's a weird thing because people who have it, it's a pretty dangerous thing actually, because people walk around and sometimes they harm themselves or even others. There's people who have to be locked in padded cells when they sleep at night because they fall asleep and they go into this altered state of consciousness, which means they start sleepwalking, and in some cases like being violent and things like this. And when they wake up, they can't remember anything about what happened. So it's a nasty thing. I mean, there's people they get into their cars and start driving when they're sleepwalking. Sometimes it's a very strange thing indeed, and quite alarming for people who suffer it, or if you know someone who suffers it. So So the family find this little kid and they say, "Oh, don't wake him up, just guide him back to his bed, because you're not supposed to wake up a sleepwalker. You have to like just peacefully try to get them back to bed and keep an eye on them to make sure they don't get out again." I don't know if that's true or not, but this they're doing that, and these 3 orbs appear, 3 lights in the sky, and they come down like tiny UFOs. And then an alien appears, like this big this thing that looks like a wasp waist kind of creature, and the farmer shoots at it, but it's not affected by anything. It reminds me a little bit of the story about like Emlyn-Jones. I don't know if you remember him on Kerry Cassidy's. I've got to interview that guy actually, because for HPANWO Radio I've been meaning to, because he's someone I get to know. He lives in Northern Ireland. He's a Welsh guy. He lives in Northern Ireland, and he was going down this road, and he came across a creature that's what he reports, which is very similar actually to what you see in this particular place. It's really strange, and it's, I don't know if there's a connection there or not, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's like this thing with a very thin waist, like almost like an insect with segmented creature, kind of vaguely humanoid. Anyway, so Quinn and Hynek go along to investigate, and they're stopped by a man on the road, a weird man with like wide staring eyes like that. I use it easy, you can see him in the title shot, and he warns them not to go there, things like that. When they arrive, they find gates everywhere. There's security gates over every window and door, and it turns out that they're doing that just to keep for the kids' protection. But Hynek, being the skeptic, he actually plays the skeptic quite a lot in this particular episode. He says, well, it could be what you saw was ball lightning. Now, ball lightning is a well-known phenomenon. It's quite rare, but it does occur during thunderstorms, and no one knows exactly how it works. Although it can be created artificially. Some people have generated little balls of light through electric discharge, but it is an electrostatic effect. Obviously, I mean that seems to be the what it is. But some people have said that this can account for some UFO sightings, and no doubt they're right in some cases, and Hynek is basically saying this. He's basically saying that that's maybe what they saw, and the family going, hang on a minute, we saw an alien as well, and it chased us, these things chased us. You know, ball lightning can't do that, can it? Things like that. So, of course Hynek does this, he plays the skeptic thing. I mean, he has this conversation with the family where the family said, I remember you were in the papers talking about that thing that happened in Washington last year, you know, the spaceship appearing in the sky. What was it you said they were? Hynek goes, temperature inversions. Temperature inversions, yeah. So they go to the location. Now something weird happens then. They hear this bubbling noise, and they look down, and you see this all together. 1, 2, 3. Black goo! Yes, there's black goo coming out of the ground, and it's bubbling. And then they look up, and Quinn, he looks up, he goes, oh my god, Dog, come and look at this. And there's this weird creature in the woods. Oh god, yeah. Oh. But it turns out it's like a scarecrow that someone has created. So it's like the Blair Witch Project. There's this effigy made of wolf skin and wooden stakes. It's made to look a bit like an alien. Of course, Hynek then thinks, "Oh, that's what you saw. That's what you were shooting at, mate." You know. Anyway, in the meantime, Susie's in trouble. Susie, the KGB agent. She's, of course, if you remember in the last episode, this is kind of like a subplot that's running concurrently to this one. They haven't merged yet. Obviously, I think at some point this plot is going to merge with the others, because as I said before, season 2 differs from season 1 in that it appears to be the different episodes are more serialized than in season 1, where the different episodes were more or less separate stories. This is definitely serialized, and the plight of Susie, the KGB agent, is a part of that. If you remember in the last episode, she killed Ed Rizzuto, the double agent, but she's in a bit of trouble now because she's cleaning up the flat, you know, Ed's flat, And of course, because there's probably some blood on the floor and things like that. She has to get. She's been clearing up the body. She's quite. She seems to be quite good at that because she had to clear away the body when her handler killed Mimi and Hynek's neighbour because she was a bit too nosy. They killed her, and the handler said, "Get rid of the body, cut it up with a saw," or something like that. And then, of course, Susie kills her handler in season 1, so she's probably quite good at burying the bodies in various places. So she's got rid of him, Ed Rizzuto, somehow, his body, and she's cleaned up his flat. And then General Harding turns up, and of course, this is because he's supposed to be a double agent. He's supposed to be working for Harding and Valentine, isn't he? Oh, so she then has to explain exactly what she's doing there, and she rather stupidly says, "Oh, I'm Ed's girlfriend," and Harding looks a bit sceptical, you know, because they would seem like a bit of an unlikely couple, seeing as he's a sort of fat, middle-aged, frumpy thing, and she's like this young, blonde, glamorous girl, you know. So it's a bit of a mismatched couple, yeah. But you never know. You never know. Nice personality, that kind of thing. But so she tries to explain it away that way, but Harding smells a rat because he says, "Well, where's Ed gone?" And she says, "Oh, he just left the flat a little while ago." And Harding's a bit suspicious, so they bring her in for questioning. Anyway, after the kid loses the little kid Billy, that's their son. He goes a bit crazy again. He ends up hiding in a cupboard, and then his father rides off to sort it out with this neighbour because he blames the neighbour because he believes that the neighbour's basically harassing them because they're out-of-towners, you know. And Hynek says, Hynek and Quinn go off to sort it out, but Quinn tries to talk him out of it, say, this is a fight between two ranchers. We better call the local police. You know, these are sort of like what's the word? It's probably rude to say hillbillies, isn't it? But they're basically guys. He's got a horse, he's got a gun. You know, he's going to go out and sort it out with his neighbour on the neighbouring ranch. But the strange thing is, like, they drive after him. And they find a horse just by the side of the road on its own. No sign of the father. Where's he? Rex, the dad. So they go off. So Quinn and Hynek go off into the woods, and they see the Black Goo again. And then something weird happens. They start sort of acting. They start reeling their heads a little bit like that, and they go, "Oh dear," you know, a bit like that. Like they feel a bit woozy, a bit dizzy. And I already get the impression then that this is going to be some kind of chemical, because they mention in the house they can smell a strange smell in the house, like a chemical smell. And indeed, I think I know. By that time, I worked out where the episode is going. There are spoilers. I mean, I should have said this at the beginning, but I mean, I say this every time in all these reviews. There are spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, better go and watch it. But Hynek sees a big black phantom dog, and he runs off. But then he looks behind him, and the dog's gone. And instead, he sees Rex, the father, going, "Hey, are you okay, Dr. Hynek?" That kind of thing. But then he finds something strange. He finds what looks like a metal pipe with a hole in it, and it's got some strange symbols on. Now Quinn goes off and he finds like some more like Blair Witch Project style effigies hanging in the trees, like loads of them, like just like the ones that they found earlier on where the kid was sleepwalking. He finds more of them, and he gets caught in this noose which like lifts him off the ground by his ankle, you know, and he's sort of like in this trap, and then you think, what's going to happen to him now? And then the neighbour turns up with a knife, and you think he's going to kill him, but he sets him free, this weird neighbour. And he's dressed like in wolf skin. He's got like makeup on, like he is some kind of Red Indian shaman himself. It's really weird, yeah. And then he claims that he's not harassing the Chapman family and their ranch at all. He claims he's trying to protect them from the Skinwalker. Oh dear. So it's getting a bit... like I said, they're very complicated, these plots. In the meantime, Susie's like questioned by Valentine. Valentine tries to get some truth out of her, and she plays it cool, you know. she sticks by her story. She's dating Rizzuto, and he's just gone off somewhere. She doesn't know where he is. So Hynek and Quinn go to find out what happened with this metal pipe, and luckily Quinn recognises it as a flare, something which has a flare in it, like a military flare. And they find the designer. There's this lady who designed it, and she said it's a white phosphorus flare. Now, white phosphorus is actually notorious because it's been used as a weapon in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's said to be against the Geneva Convention. But it's also used. I mean, it is because it's an incendiary. It's nasty stuff. It sticks where it lands. It's an incendiary. So if you get on it, it'll burn you. You know. But she also says that it was used basically for lighting and things like that. You know, like for casting a light on a battlefield at night, that kind of thing. And so Hynek and Quinn feel that she's hiding something, and this is where you get the impression that there's some connection with a nearby base, this army base where she's been designing these things, and the ranch. And Quinn and Hynek are going, something's not right here. She's lying. They're keeping something from us. And there's other things. I mean, there's the Black Goo, of course, which, funny thing is, the Black Goo is never referred to. Nowhere in this particular episode is the Black Goo referred to, and I don't know if that's deliberate, if that's a plot hole that was never covered or never completed. So it's basically left, but it basically has left an untied loose end. I don't know if that's an error on the part of the writers. I mean, as I said, the last episode was the storyline fell apart a bit at the end. I felt with the last episode. Now, I didn't get the impression with this episode. It's possible this thing with the Black Goo will come back. It'll come back into the story another time. That's what I get the feeling. And where they got the idea of Black Goo from, they obviously watched the Bases Project or something like that. Maybe the people who wrote it got the idea. I don't know. But there's sounds from underground. This is another thing that happened. They keep hearing. They have a strange smell. They feel strange. They have these hallucinations. Or, well, that's giving it away, isn't it? They're hallucinations. They see these strange things. And there's also these sounds from underground, like earthquakes. And indeed, this earthquake strikes while they're driving along a road, and a telegraph pole falls down, causing a blackout in the ranch. So, what's going on? What's happening? Yeah. So, Quinn and Hynek are sort of like stuck in their car, thinking there's an earthquake hitting. Strange smells, strange noises. People keep seeing things. It's a bit of a puzzle. Where do all these pieces fit together? Now. Then something happens which, to Mimi Hynek, young Mimi, I was thinking about her in the last episode where she's done up to look like an old lady. So this is just Mimi as she is. She's probably 40 something or something like that. But she's, of course, Hynek's wife, but she's actually helping him. She's now part of the research project, and she's now part of this plot that Hynek and Quinn have to work outside the normal channels. And if you remember from the last episode, she manages to blag her way into looking at the Project Blue Book records, thanks to the help of Faye, the secretary. But now things are different. She goes back to the Project Blue Book base, and Faye won't let her in. So that's now out the question. She can't get away with that anymore. They're not willing to bend the rules like that anymore. And she goes to her UFO group, and the leader, in a rather embarrassed way, tells her he's kicking her out of the group because they don't trust her. They says it's too much of a risk to have someone like you here, who's involved with this person with Project Blue Book, who's married to this guy with Project Blue Book and is helping him and helping us. We think it's too much of a risk, and because of the Robertson panel, we want you out of the group. Which is pretty rich, actually, considering they've been essentially using Mimi Hynek to get undercover information, and they want to kick her out of the group when she's no longer useful and becomes a liability through no fault of her own. Mimi's very upset about this, quite understandably, and it's a pretty nasty thing to do. Not least, I mean, it shows that this UFO group's not really serious if they're not willing to take risks. If you're going to investigate UFOs, sometimes you have to take risks. But I mean, the Robertson panel did recommend, as this comes up in the last episode, they recommended monitoring UFO groups. And I think that's where this all comes from. This is why they're doing this to Mimi, because they think that I think they think she's a spy for the Robertson panel because of Hynek. Now Hynek sort of, the whole dynamic has changed between these civilian private groups and the government official investigations. So obviously I understand their concern, and indeed the Robertson panel, as we explained, as we discussed in the last episode, or as I said in the last episode, they did recommend monitoring civilian UFO groups, but what they've done is, I think, unfair, because of course Mimi's not a spy. She's not spying on them for the Robertson panel. That's a shame, though, isn't it? That's a shame. Anyway, back at the ranch, the little kid Billy, he has like this toy, which is like it's like a jack-in-the-box. You know, these things that I think you still get them. I think kids still play with them. A box which you turn a handle on it and it plays some music. Eventually, in an unexpected moment, the box opens and this like toy jumps out, like a toy, like a doll, looking like a clown. It's known as a jack-in-the-box, and the kid, you could play with them and guess when the thing was going to pop out. And so Billy, the little kid, has been using this. He turns it, and the noise, he says, scares off the alien. And he does use the word "the alien." Now, as Hynek then comes and hears the music playing, he goes into Billy's bedroom and he says, "Hey Billy, what's going on?" And the little kid goes, "Oh, I'm doing this to ward off the alien." And Hynek says, "Look, it's this. It won't make any difference because there is no alien. It's all in your head. It's just your mind playing tricks on you." So Hynek is playing the resolute skeptic, even when he's faced with like a boy who's probably about 6 or 7 years old. And I don't think you can actually, at that age, I don't think it's probably possible to explain that to a child of that age. It's a conversation that Hynek really ought to be having with the parents. Anyway, he says, "Look, if you go to bed, I'll fix it for you." So he takes it and sleep. Hynek falls asleep with this jack-in-the-box beside him. Then he wakes up and it's gone. And he sort of wonders where he thinks the little kid's taken. He says, "Billy, where are you? Go back to bed." And he goes downstairs and the jack-in-the-box is there. And he turns the handle and the thing pops out. And then all hell breaks loose because he looks up and there's this alien there. Let's say this wasp-waist, humanoid, slightly insectoid alien. It's a scary looking thing with a head that looks a bit like a jack-o'-lantern. You know, the Halloween things, which like you scoop out a pumpkin and put a light inside it. Its head looks a bit like that. I jumped when I saw that, I really did. And then they rush around, and then the neighbour dressed like a shaman is outside saying, and the father goes crazy and says, "Where's my kid? Where's my kid?" Because the little boy's disappeared, and they're blaming this man. I mean, the family, the Chapman family blame this neighbour for everything that's been happening. So they immediately accuse him, and he says, I'm here to protect you. The Skinwalker got the boy." And oh god, it's like, anyway, they find a secret passageway leading from the house into this tunnel underneath the house. Now, so Hynek and Quinn go down into this passageway with their torches and they go along, and it's like a brick-lined passageway with some pipes on the ceiling. It looks like part of a cellar. It looks like, it's not like it's just dug out of the earth. It's like a sophisticated tunnel leading from the Skinwalker Ranch to somewhere. Now what's weird is that firstly they get the smell again and they start to see things and hear strange noises, and then you get the rumbling again of the underground work, the underground tunnel, the underground thing. It's very interesting actually, because this reminds me of the UFO Hunters. Do you remember the UFO Hunters series, where Bill Burns and these other two guys go investigating UFOs, and they investigate the Montauk project, and they find what they think is a secret passageway leading from a hotel in the direction of the Camp Hero base, which is where there's an underground. They also find like the remains of an underground base there, exactly where one was supposed to be, according to people like Stuart Swerdlow and what's his name? I can't remember his name. Branton and other. Oh, what's that? No, that was the Dulcie base. Well, it'll come to me in a minute. But the other guys who talked about the Montauk base, and they found this tunnel leading just from, it looks like a normal tunnel leading from the cellar, but they couldn't see where it went. Eventually it got very small and they couldn't go down it. But it was heading towards Camp Hero, where this Montauk Base was meant to be. Indeed, as Richard Dolan who was part of that series, he actually found, they used ground penetrating radar and they found like underground passageway exactly where Stuart Swerdlow said they were, and indeed other people such as the man whose name I can't think of right now, but it'll come to me. So they go along this passageway and they come to like a ladder leading upwards. And this is after they saw the strange creature, the Skinwalker thing again, and it was like, but only one of them saw it. Only Quinn saw it. Hynek didn't. And this is where you're given a clue that it's just a hallucination caused by whatever that smell is. And they climb up, and there's this like manhole cover. Albie Lex, sorry, the name that I couldn't remember before is Albie Lex. Bloody hell! If you never can't think of a name, just don't think about it for a while. It'll come to you. Albie Lex. They find Billy in this laboratory. It looks like some kind of psychological laboratory, and he's sitting there watching TV. He's just watching like a normal TV program on a television set. He's sitting in an armchair, and they go up to him. And they look around, and there's this guy in a white lab coat in the thing, and it's like, what's going on? What are you doing with this kid? And the man presses a button, and there's like an alarm bell goes off, and suddenly these security guards run in with weapons, and they arrest Hynek and Quinn. And then you find out what's been going on. The designer, the lady who designed the white phosphorus flares, she says they're doing experiments into the subject of tectonic strain. Now, tectonic strain this comes up in ufology. It's where you have pressure building up on a fault line in the ground just before an earthquake happens. So it's basically an uneven pressure which eventually gives in the form of an earthquake. That what causes faults to shift and earthquakes to happen. Now, there's a lot of people have said they see sightings of ball lightning, earth lights, orbs, these type of UFOs occur an awful lot leading up to an earthquake. People who see them often say they often find earthquakes happen soon afterwards. There's even a couple of people who've seen these things and they live in an earthquake hotspot, and they actually say their lives are saved because they get out of the area before the earthquake hits. And so they're studying, and this lady says they're doing a secret government operation to test this connection between tremors, tectonic strain and UFO sightings. And there is a theory in ufology that, and indeed it holds some water, I must say, in some cases, that the presence of tectonic strain and possible the build-up of electric charges and things like that in the ground, which leads to orbs and ball lightning, can make people perceive things in terms of hallucinations. And they said they were extracting natural gas from, and the actual, this is what caused the earthquakes. So they were extracting natural gas from the ground. Now, this is a kind of fracking, so they're basically doing a kind of fracking, and to see if that was a factor as well. That these earthquakes that release this natural gas through earthquakes contribute to the hallucination effect. This is what they're doing, an experiment into UFOs, independent of Project Blue Book. Which, so the designer wasn't telling the whole truth. This is the lady, they say, who designed that flare. So, of course, this means they're using the residents of the Chapman Ranch as unwitting subjects. Lab rats, Hynek calls it. He calls them lab rats. So, that, of course, is highly illegal. And she says, well, it's classified. We're just doing this classified operation. And of course, this sort of thing goes on, doesn't it? I mean, you've seen there's many examples of the government doing this sort of thing, carrying out some kind of experiment and using people as test subjects without their permission, without their consent. For example, in 1955, I think I mentioned it in the 1955 incident where San Francisco, the city of San Francisco, was sprayed from aircraft with a soil bacteria which produces mild cold-like symptoms in people. And they wanted to see how many people would develop these symptoms and where they were. And the reason was that it was an experiment to see what would happen, how quickly biological warfare agents would spread through the population should, let's say, the Soviets decide to use them. Some people claim that that's what the coronavirus is. Well, I think we discussed that in the live stream, and there's a possibility. So this sort of thing is done an awful lot with people. The government will do experiments on people and not tell them. Highly illegal, of course, completely against the law, but it's classified. Very often, not, you know, there's very little is actually found out about it. When concerned citizens actually get involved and they try to investigate, they have to get private investigators in. The police won't investigate. Sometimes these citizens are warned off through threats, things like that. Numerous examples, many examples of things like that. And it looks like this is what was happening with this ranch. That this was all caused by the government doing this experiment. And Hynek starts stamping his feet, and he starts threatening this designer, saying, look, we'll go to the papers and we'll get the word out of what you've been doing if you don't give the Chapman family some compensation. And he gets his way. What happens is the family they decide to sell the ranch, even though it's going to bankrupt them, and Hynek says, look, it won't bankrupt you, the government are going to give you some money. So that's it, so they get some money out of it, so they're happy with that, just to compensate them. Now, of course, then in the final scene, now this is the epilogue scene, I assumed that this was like the token non-ET episode. Now there was one in season 1, it was the Scoutmaster story. Do you remember the Scoutmaster's tale? It was one of the episodes in season 1. This turned out not to be UFO related. It turned out to be an act of fraud on the part of one of the characters. And I thought this was going to be the same. I thought, well, this is obviously the token non-ET episode they put into season 2, because they don't want to have an ET explanation for every single episode. But then in the final scene, in the epilogue, you see like an estate agent showing some potential buyers around the ranch. And you hear this growling noise, like a growling sound, and you see the camera like he's in the bushes, as if there's something peering out at the people, like a man, a woman and a child. And then the final shot is in the tunnel, and you see the Skinwalker creature. So the hint at the end of the episode is that there was something really ET and paranormal behind the whole thing. Only this tiny little bit at the end. And as I explained, the presence of the Black Goo is never addressed in this episode. It's never discussed. I mean, maybe the writers just put it in there and assumed that this was like the gas coming up from the ground or something like that, the bubbling coming up from the earthquakes the government were doing. But I don't think so. I think there must be more to it than that. And I've got a feeling this is going to come up. There's 3 more episodes to go, 8, 9 and 10. Perhaps the Black Goo will come up again. We'll see, won't we? Because, well, I'm going to watch them. And when I do watch them, you will be able to watch my review on this channel, live and exclusive, or at least exclusive, on HPANWO TV. Because I'm doing an episode by episode set of reviews, as you've noticed, probably. What I'm going to do actually is when I finish, it'll be a few days, it depends what my schedule is, but when I finish doing these reviews of each of the episodes, we'll have a live stream, just like last time. We had a Project Blue Book live stream. We'll have another Project Blue Book live stream for season 2. And I'm sure you'll enjoy that, won't you, HPANWO TV viewers? So that'll be sometime next week, probably, if I get to do all these episodes, as I am, seeing as I'm only working for 3 hours a day. So thanks to the coronavirus. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for the next episode review, and for the notice for the live stream when all those are over. Hope to see you in the chat box when that comes. Sometime next week, probably, like I said. So thank you for watching HPANWO TV once again. I'm going to continue enjoying Project Blue Book, and I hope you do too. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.